I am Statlium and Lil'wat. I, learned some of the language, learned some of the songs that my mom had taught me. My father didn't want us to learn our language because of what he went through in residential school, and knowing how Canadian society is, he said it would be better off if we didn't learn our language, which is unfortunate, but I know, I will say it was out of love for us that he made that decision. My mom, her father, was very little information about him. And he basically said that he didn't have any children. Affected my mom, and, she really didn't acknowledge him and didn't acknowledge that side of the family. I looked up his name in Lil'wat and found out where he worked, and so, contacted BC Rail for any information and found his obituary in the newspapers. So from all these clues, I was able to, track down that he served in World War I for Canada, and was able to obtain those records and find out exactly where he was from in Sweden. My grandfather had a sister in Galveston, and
there are misunderstandings on both sides. There are misunderstandings that should be corrected.
But when we stand on our land, but when we stand on our land to protect it, we're thrown in jail. Stand on our land to protect it, we're thrown in jail. Those reservations are just like a jail.
Apparently I was singing from a really young age. 3, 4, I would sing with my mom, and at a lot of community events, my mom would bring me up to sing with her. My early teens, when my voice changed and I stopped singing for a couple of years because it was so squeaky then. I earned the name Rusty because of my voice. My first instrument was a guitar. I was about 6 or 7, and my dad gave me a choice, accordion or guitar, and, well, of course, I've heard the guitar in a lot of music, so it's like the choice was obvious to me. It was a guitar, and I took a few lessons, but it got really strange, and I felt really uncomfortable with what I was being taught and who was teaching me at that point. So I think after the first month, I just, I quit, and, my dad was disappointed, but I never told him why, and I never wanted to tell him why. I just felt so embarrassed by everything. Yeah, so, I learned the basics of guitar at that point, and, in those days, we'd be learning how to play Ode to Joy on the guitar, one note at a time, and to me, that wasn't fun, so, I kind of left the guitar alone for a little while, and I picked it up and just started learning chords after that point. But listening to the records and learning some of the scales, so, learning how Santana played, his solos, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a little different from, the blues scales that I was learning at that time as well. So yeah, guitar's always been with me. I'm not proficient. Welcome to the unceded lands of my ancestors. Welcome to the unceded lands of my children. Welcome to the unceded lands that bore the ore that built this great city, that built these roads I can stagger down, that built these street corners I can disappear from, that built these alleys I can be left to die in, that built these schools that I can be punished in, that built these prisons I can be locked in, that built these laws that I could be hung from, that built your confidence and arrogance to demand reconciliation. How do you reconcile a tongue torn from its roots, a child ripped from his mother, generations of apprehension? How do you reconcile the blood inside the underwear of a 7-year-old? How do you reconcile with a fire that still burns? Welcome to the unseated tongue that lies within my head. When you look up to these mountains, you reflect on all the knees that were bruised behind closed doors. When you see these rivers, know the tears that flowed into them after burying the children. And when you hear the wind, listen to these words that are still spoken. Kukwstum. Welcome. Welcome. You know, our land is divided, and our nations have been divided. Being an idealist and hopeful that, you know, Salish territory, Salish people would be unified, united. The Canadian and U.S. border basically cuts our nations in half. And so, you know, that history of colonialism and a number of different things have brought us to the point of like, oh, we're the other. We're always the other.
Department of Indian Affairs, Canada, Ottawa, 15 December, 1921. Dear Sir, it is observed with alarm that the holding of dances by the Indians on their reserves is on the increase, and that these practices tend to disorganize the efforts which the department is putting forth to make them self-supporting. I have, therefore, to direct you to use your utmost endeavors to dissuade the Indians from excessive indulgence in the practice of dancing. They should not be allowed to dissipate their energies and abandon themselves to demoralizing amusements. By the use of tact and firmness, you can obtain control and keep it, and this obstacle to continued progress will then disappear. Deputy Superintendent General, Department of Indian Affairs, Canada.
I was born in Tacoma, Washington, when my parents were living in the United States. They moved there in 1955 and moved back shortly after I was born. I've lived in Vancouver most of my life. When we first moved back to Canada, we lived in Musqueam for a while, and a lot of my sisters married into many of the different Musqueam families. East Van is where I grew up. My parents bought a house at 18th and Quebec. I went to school at Simon Fraser Elementary and went to a number of different high schools because high school didn't fit me and I didn't fit high school, so they're within the Vancouver School Board. Growing up in the 80s, a lot of the music I really liked were the alternative fringe bands. So Talking Heads, certainly, Brian Eno. Some of the David Bowie I really liked. Laurie Anderson for sure. New Order and Joy Division's Love Will Tear Us Apart was one of those songs that really got to me when I was like 17. So when I first heard it, it was like, wow. It's a simple song, but I mean, like, the lyrics are completely different from what you hear on the radio, and the sounds were very raw. Music from other cultures, and one of them was Sheila Chandra, and like hearing her take traditional classical Indian music, changing it a bit and adding popular music elements to it. It was like changed how I viewed my own traditional music. You know, I did experiment with tapes at Co-op Radio, like editing and cutting and figuring out tape loops, figuring out feedback and stuff like that. So figuring out the technical side of things.
To live like human beings again.
My mom was a singer, and she sang all the time. My sisters would sing with her, so I would hear that. And having 10 siblings living with you, all at various ages, and back in the 60s, hearing my older sisters buying records, Motown records, and a lot of the popular music from them. But yeah, I think music was the most impactful sound that I heard. My early influences, I guess, would be R&B music of the 60s and 70s. So, Motown for sure, but then like listening to Al Green and Barry White, and that music was really I guess soulful is the word you could say. I loved the harmonies to a lot of it. Earth, Wind and Fire I loved. So there was all these harmonies, but there was always a beat, and they were fun songs. And then a couple of impactful things. I bought these records around the same time when I was 12 years old and back in 1977. So buying the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever and then buying Asia by Steely Dan. And both of them really shaped how I liked music, or how I wanted to see, music come together. So with Saturday Night Fever, it was all these songs that were played at disco. So like there's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of rhythms in there and a lot of loops. So like, if you listen to the Tramps' Disco Inferno, it's like a 10-minute song. But in the middle, there's a part where it's just looping the same pattern over and over. And to me, I was like, this is really cool. I mean, Donna Summer's I Feel Love came out that same year, and that also had an impact on me, just hearing